Okay, stop scrolling. It's dark out. You walked from your car to your front door, 30 seconds, and you looked over your shoulder once, without deciding to. Now take away the streetlight. Take away the door. It's 50,000 years ago, and the sun has just gone down. So, are you going hunting? Because you have probably absorbed, from somewhere, the image of ancient humans as night hunters. Spears, torches, moving through the dark after something. It is a great image. And I have to be straight with you before we go any further. It is largely wrong, and the reason it is wrong is far more interesting than the picture it replaces. Ancient humans mostly did not hunt at night. They were about as badly suited to it as an animal can be, but they did do something at night. Something no other creature on this planet has ever managed, and by the end of this you are going to understand why you checked over your shoulder in your own driveway. Let's go. Start with your eyes, because your eyes settle most of this argument on their own. You are a daylight animal, not casually, but deeply, structurally, all the way down. Your retina is loaded with cone cells, the receptors that give you sharp detail and color, and cones need light. In darkness, they stop reporting almost entirely, which is why the world goes gray when the sun goes down. You do have rods, the low light receptors, and plenty of them, so you are not blind out there. But what you lose is acuity. Detail collapses, edges soften. You cannot tell a bush from a crouching animal at 30 meters, and you certainly cannot read the small signs on the ground that daylight tracking depends on. And there is a piece of hardware you simply do not have. Most animals that genuinely own the night carry a reflective layer behind the retina, a mirror that bounces light back through the receptors for a second attempt. It is why a cat's eyes flare in a torch beam and yours do not. That mirror roughly doubles the use an animal gets out of available light. You have no such thing. Nothing in our lineage does. On top of that, your night vision takes time to arrive. Full dark adaptation takes something like 20 to 30 minutes, and a single bright light resets a good chunk of it instantly. So even the vision you do have is slow to load, and easy to ruin. Now, the obvious objection. Surely the other senses pick up the slack. They help. They do not close the gap, and it is worth being precise about why. Your hearing is genuinely good, and in the dark it becomes your primary long-range sense. You can locate a snapped twig with reasonable accuracy, and you will hear a large animal moving through dry vegetation well before you see it. But hearing tells you roughly where, and roughly how big. It does not tell you what, or which way it is facing, or whether there is one or three. And it is useless for the thing hunting depends on most, which is tracking, because tracks make no sound. Smell is more interesting, and there is a myth here I want to knock over on the way past. You have very probably been told that humans have a feeble sense of smell compared with other mammals. That claim has taken a serious beating in recent years. The research it rested on is old and shaky, and the more careful modern work suggests human olfactory discrimination is far better than the textbook version allowed, comparable to other mammals across a great many odors. We are not the anosmic weaklings we were sold as. But being good at telling smells apart is not the same as being able to follow a scent trail across a landscape, and that is what a hunting dog is doing, and you are not. Our noses are high off the ground, we do not sample the air the way a tracking animal does, and we cannot build a directional picture out of it. So the other senses give you presence. Vision gives you information, and at night, you are working with presence alone. Put that together, and the conclusion is not subtle. Hunting is a task built almost entirely on seeing things before they see you, on reading ground, on judging distance for a throw. Night removes the sense that all of that runs on and gives you nothing back. So the honest answer to why ancient humans hunted at night begins with, mostly, they did not. Daylight was the working day, and it was the working day for excellent reasons. But it gets worse than merely being bad at it, and this is where the real hazard shows up. Think about who else is out there. The animals that were genuinely dangerous to a human being are, overwhelmingly, animals that prefer low light. Leopards and lions do a great deal of their hunting around dusk, through the night, and around dawn. Hyenas, the same. The pattern is not an accident. Low light favors the ambusher, the one who closes distance quietly, the one whose eyes work in conditions where yours have given up. So going out after dark is not just working with a degraded sense, it is voluntarily entering the shift when every animal that eats people is clocking on. And you are the only one who cannot see. That is the arithmetic our ancestors were solving, and it explains something you may never have thought about, that the great human advantage, the ability to hurt something from 30 meters away, evaporates completely in the dark. You cannot throw at what you cannot resolve. In darkness, a human is reduced from a ranged threat to a soft, slow, close-quarters animal, which is the one thing we were never any good at being. Which raises the obvious question, if night was that bad, what on earth was it for? And here is where the story turns, because the answer is not hunting. It is fire, and fire did not do what you think it did. The intuitive version goes like this. Humans got fire. Fire is light. Therefore humans could see at night. Therefore humans hunted at night. Every step of that sounds reasonable, and the conclusion is mostly wrong. A fire is a terrible hunting lamp. It is bright at the center and useless 20 meters out. Worse, staring at it destroys the dark adaptation you spent half an hour building, so a person who has been sitting by a fire is functionally blinder in the surrounding dark than someone who has been sitting in it. Fire announces you for a very long way. It is heavy to carry, it needs feeding, and a torch in your hand is a hand not holding a spear. What fire actually did was something else entirely, and it is much stranger. It made the night habitable. There is a genuinely lovely piece of research on this by the anthropologist Polly Wiesner, who spent decades with Juhoense communities in southern Africa, and did something nobody had thought to do. She compared what people talk about during the day with what they talk about after dark by the fire. Daytime conversation turned out to be heavily practical. Land, resources, arrangements, disputes, complaints, the business of getting through a day. But at night, around a fire, the content shifted. Stories, singing. Talk about people who were not present, about distant places, about the dead, about the imagined. Read that again, because it reframes the whole subject. Fire did not extend the hunting day. It created something that had never existed on this planet before, which is leisure time in the dark. A protected block of hours where nobody could work, nobody could travel, and there was nothing to do but be together and talk. Which means the answer to what ancient humans did at night is closer to culture than to hunting. Night is where the stories were, and stories are where everything else came from. But I promised you the times they genuinely did go out, because they did, and the specific cases are the interesting part. The first is the moon. Moonlight is not a rounding error. A full moon on open ground, especially with any pale surface to reflect off, is dramatically more useful than a moonless night, and human activity in a number of societies tracks it. Full moon periods are associated with more nighttime movement, more socializing, more travel, and yes, more opportunity to be out doing things. And here is a detail that should genuinely unsettle you. It still happens to you. Careful work published in 2021, looking at both indigenous communities in Argentina and university students in Seattle, found that human sleep shifts with the lunar cycle. People tend to go to bed later and sleep less in the nights running up to a full moon, and the pattern showed up in communities with no electricity and in city dwellers with all the lighting in the world. Nobody in that study was making a decision about the moon. Their sleep was doing it anyway. I should flag the honest caveat. The effect is small, and lunar research has a long and slightly embarrassing history of overclaiming, so treat individual dramatic moon findings with suspicion. But sleep timing tracking the lunar cycle has held up better than most of it. The second real case is water. In arid landscapes during a dry season, game does not distribute itself evenly. It concentrates, because it has to drink, and it often comes to water in the cooler hours. That turns a water hole into the one place where you know, with near certainty, that animals will arrive. Hunting from a concealed position near water, including after dark, is a documented practice in a number of dry country societies, and it makes sense precisely because it removes the part humans are bad at. You are not searching. You are not tracking. You are not resolving movement at distance. You are sitting still, in a known spot, waiting for something to come to you at close range. That is the pattern for essentially every genuine case of night hunting. It is never roaming. It is always ambush. The third case is fish, and it is my favorite, because it inverts the whole problem. Fish and many aquatic animals are drawn to light, so people across an enormous range of cultures have fished at night using fire, holding a burning torch or a basket of embers over the water from a boat or a shoreline, letting the light gather the catch into a small bright circle. In that one situation, fire genuinely is a hunting tool. It is not helping you see. It is making the prey come to you. Think about how clever that is. Every disadvantage of firelight, the way it destroys your night vision, the way it announces your position, becomes irrelevant because you have stopped trying to find anything. You made a place where the animals go. The fourth case is heat, and it is not about hunting at all. In genuinely hot environments, moving in the middle of the day is dangerous, and traveling at night is a thermal decision. So people crossed country in the dark not because they were hunting, but because daylight would have killed them. Some night activity in the record is not a hunting strategy. It is simply the least bad time to walk. And the fifth is small things. Nocturnal animals exist and can be caught, particularly small game that can be located by sound, dug out of a known burrow, or collected rather than pursued. Insects around a light, nestlings, shellfish on a night tide. None of it is dramatic. All of it is calories. So that is the honest list, and notice what is missing from it. There is no torchlit chase. There is no dramatic pursuit of a large animal through the darkness. Ambush, water, light fishing, travel, and gathering small things. It is a much less cinematic answer, and a much more human one. And there is one more thing to say about timing, because I think the question we started with is slightly the wrong question. The interesting hours are not the middle of the night, they are the edges. Dawn and dusk are when an enormous amount of hunting actually happened, and the reason is that twilight is a genuinely favorable trade. Many prey animals move at those hours, feeding and drinking before and after the heat. Cooler air makes tracking and long pursuit possible. And crucially, there is still light. Not much, but enough for a human eye to resolve shapes and judge a throw, which is the threshold that matters. So a great deal of what gets remembered as night hunting was probably the tail end of dusk, or the front end of dawn, in that narrow band where the light is failing, or arriving, but has not gone. Ancient humans were not nocturnal, and they were not strictly diurnal either. They worked the seam. Which brings up something that only becomes obvious when you try to picture it properly. How do you move through country in near darkness at all? Not by looking. There is not enough information coming in. You do it by knowing, and that turns out to require two things almost nothing else has. The first is a durable mental map. You can cross ground in the dark that you have walked in daylight many times, because you are not navigating visually. You are running a remembered model and checking it against occasional landmarks. The route is in your head, not in front of your eyes. The second is that you can be given a map you never made. Somebody can tell you where the gully turns, where the ground drops away, which side of the rock to pass. That information transfers in words, which means a person can walk safely through a landscape in the dark on the strength of somebody else's memory. I would flag that as inference, not evidence, because nobody can ever excavate a mental map, but it is hard to see how night travel over any distance works without both. Now let me take the most popular story about ancient knights and pull it apart, because this is where everything you think you know gets quietly dismantled. You have almost certainly encountered the claim that humans are naturally biphasic sleepers, that before artificial light, everybody slept in 2 blocks with a waking period in the middle, and that the modern 8-hour stretch is an industrial invention that has been quietly ruining us. Part of that is real. The historian Roger Eckhart assembled a genuinely impressive body of evidence that in early modern Europe, segmented sleep was a normal and named part of life, with a first sleep, a period of wakefulness, and a second sleep. That work is solid, and the sources are there. The trouble is what got built on top of it. The leap from early modern Europe to all of human history is a very long jump, and when researchers went and actually measured sleep in living hunter-gatherer and forager-horticulturalist groups, using wrist monitors rather than assumptions, the result was awkward. Work across Hadza, San, and Tsimane communities found sleep durations broadly comparable to industrialized populations, in the range you would expect, and did not find a consistent, universal 2-block pattern. So the confident version, that segmented sleep is the natural human condition and we have lost it, is overreach. What the evidence supports is that sleep is flexible, shaped by climate, season, temperature, and light, and that a segmented pattern is one thing humans do, in some places, at some times, rather than the factory setting. I want to be fair here. This is an active argument, not a settled score, and the measurement studies have limitations of their own. But if you have been told that your ancestors all woke in the middle of every night, and that your unbroken sleep is unnatural, that is a stronger claim than anyone can currently support. And this is where I get to tell you the finding that reframes the entire night. Picture the practical reality of a camp after dark first, because it is easy to romanticize. You are on the ground, or on something thin laid over it. It gets cold, often much colder than people expect, and a fire that is not fed goes out. Somebody has to put wood on it, and wood does not last until morning. There are insects, and there is noise, and there is the constant low-grade problem that you cannot see past the edge of the light. So a night camp is not a building with a door. It is a soft, warm, poorly defended spot in an open landscape containing everybody you care about, all of whom are about to be unconscious for hours, where things hunt in the dark. That is the actual problem to be solved, and it is a much larger problem than dinner. Because the same researchers looking at Hadza sleep noticed something else, something nobody had gone looking for. The Hadza do not all sleep at the same time. Older individuals tend to fall asleep earlier and wake earlier. Younger adults stay up later and sleep later. Add in the ordinary fragmentation of sleep across many people of many ages, and you get an emergent effect. Across hundreds of hours of monitored group sleep, there was almost no moment when everybody was simultaneously asleep. In one analysis of over 200 hours, the total time in which the entire group was unconscious together amounted to a matter of minutes. Nobody organized that. There was no rota, no one was assigned a watch. It falls out for free from the simple fact that human sleep timing varies with age, and a group containing a range of ages will therefore contain, at almost any hour of the night, somebody who happens to be awake. That is the answer to the question nobody asked. Not what did ancient humans hunt at night, but how did they survive being asleep in a landscape full of nocturnal predators? They were never all asleep. And the thing I find genuinely moving about this is who was doing it. The reason the group is covered in the small hours is, substantially, that older people sleep badly. The very thing we treat as a medical complaint, the grandparent who is awake at 4 in the morning and cannot get back off, is plausibly a feature. For most of our history, the person lying awake in the dark was the reason everybody else could afford to be unconscious. Let's bring all of this together, because the shape of it is the answer. Ancient humans did not hunt at night in any general sense. Their eyes were wrong for it, their great weapon of distance was useless in it, and the dark belonged to the animals that ate them. When they did go out after dark, they did it in tightly specific circumstances, under a full moon, at water where prey had to come to them, on a shoreline where firelight pulled fish into reach, on a night march because daylight would have cooked them, or collecting small things that could be heard rather than seen. What they actually did with the night was more remarkable than hunting. They took the least survivable hours of the day and made them safe enough to sit in. Fire gave them a small circle of manufactured daylight. Varied sleep gave them a watch nobody had to organize. And into that protected space went the talking, the singing, and the stories. Which is to say that the imagination has a location, and the location is a fire after dark. Every other animal on Earth is locked to the light the planet gives it. We are the only one that built our own, and then filled it with conversation. So go back to your driveway. 30 seconds from the car to the door, in a street lit well enough to read by, in a country with nothing living in it that hunts you. And you still looked over your shoulder. You did not decide to do that. Something older than deciding did it for you, because for hundreds of thousands of years, the dark was the one place a human being genuinely could not manage alone. You made it inside. Somebody, a very long time ago, sat up all night, so that eventually you could.